Hi and welcome. We've been going through Psalms in our daily devotionals, and today's Psalm is from Psalm 86. It's a prayer of David's for God's continued mercy. 17 verses that give us a glimpse into David's God-dependent heart. We've been following David's life through Psalms for the past few months now, and we've seen the struggles and pain that he has experienced and how he was continually turned his face towards God. The shepherd turned king, known as a man after God's own heart. What caught my attention in this passage, though, was verse 16, where he asks of God, "Turn to me and have mercy on me. Show me strength in behalf of your servant. Save me, because I serve you just as my mother did." What do we know about David's mother? Who was she? How did she serve God? It was enough that it made a lasting impression on a shepherd boy turned giant slayer turned king. There's very little information we know about her. We see her mentioned in chapter 55, where David was sinful from the time his mother conceived him, and how God desired faithfulness even in the womb while she was carrying him, and how God was teaching him wisdom in that secret place. According to sources outside of the Bible, her name was Nitzebet, which means standing woman. She's married to Jesse and has at least 9 children with Jesse, 7 sons and 2 daughters. I started thinking, as one mom to another, what her heart must have gone through. I wondered what she thought when David, her youngest, was assigned to tending sheep. Did it keep her up at night thinking about her early teen being out with sheep and wild animals? How would he protect himself from the lions and bears? Why was he excluded when the other brothers were asked to come before Samuel when he requested to see Jesse's sons in 1 Samuel 16? So we see how David would be asked to do some of the lowliest jobs. Besides tending sheep, he was an errand boy who had to serve his brothers. Why did Nitzebet's other sons despise him, like we read about in 1 Samuel 17? And his dad had asked him to run out food to his brothers who were on the front lines in the battlefield. And after asking about Goliath, his brothers say to him, "I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle." David says, "Now what have I done? Can't I even speak?" It seems to indicate that this wasn't the first time his brothers had given him a hard time. There seems to be this continued pattern of sibling mistreatment. David mentions it in Psalms 69:8, where he says, "I am a foreigner to my own family, a stranger to my own mother's children." He laments when he weeps and fasts, he has to endure scorn. When he puts on sackcloth, people make sport of him. Those who sit at the gate mock him, and he is the song of the drunkards. In verse 14, we see how David is constantly being attacked, where ruthless people are always trying to kill him. So how did David's mom comfort and build back self-esteem and confidence? How did the standing woman encourage her son when she would see his siblings and the townspeople being so unkind and mean to him? You've heard it said that Mama Bear is such a sweet way to describe the fact that "I'd tear you open and eat your insides if you hurt my child." I still feel that way, and I have grown-up children. But your job is to help them to become God-dependent. You can't protect them from the world. But what about David's mom inspired him to serve God just like she did? I think about the other amazing moms mentioned in the Bible that experienced great heartache for their children. There was Eve, who had to work through the emotions of her son Cain killing her other son Abel. Or Rachel, hearing about how her son was left in the bottom of a well by his brothers and sold off into slavery. Or there's the mother of Jesus. I can't even begin to comprehend what her heart was asked to live through. How did they survive? They had to be God-dependent women. I wonder if Nitzebet's prayers for her picked-on child included asking God in his mercy to give David a sound mind and body. It could have happened. We know that at a young age, David was glowing with health and fine in appearance. Perhaps she watched her, as she watched her other children mistreat David, she would ask God to give him a good friend so that he could feel accepted and belong. We know that God was gracious and gave him a best friend with Jonathan. Maybe he was an odd child, and she would pray that he could find favor in the eyes of others. Who knows why? In 1 Samuel, it tells us that upon meeting him, Saul liked him very much. What about David's mom inspired him to serve God just like she did? She raised other children. Did they serve God just like she did? Based on David's words, I would assume her character was committed to the prayers of all of her children. We don't get to determine the paths our children will choose. What we can do is we can serve God, be faithful, and trust our children to God. But David was one that turned his face toward God and became a man after God's own heart. David, who would cry out to God for mercy because he could trust that God, and with God, everything that fell apart would fall into place. Maybe his mom showed him that he could win, lose, fail, succeed, cry, and laugh, and still not break, because God had not failed her in these ways. Maybe she learned by serving God he was giving and forgiving and good and abounding in love to all who call on him. Maybe she taught him that God would hear his prayer and listen to his cry for mercy because he had for her. Because she served God, he could know that among the gods there was none other like her Lord. Perhaps she had told David stories about how great and marvelous God's deeds were, and he alone was God. Was her faith so wholehearted that David would ask God to teach him his ways and rely on his faithfulness to give him an undivided heart like his mom's? Did she know how great the love of God was for her, so that her son grew up knowing beyond anything else that he too was loved by God? What about David's mom inspired him to serve God just like she did? We don't know, except that this God-dependent mom showed her son how to be a God-dependent man. It made me ask, is my life inspiring my children to serve God? How do we inspire our sons and daughters after God's own heart? How are we teaching them to turn their tragedies and hardships into ways of depending on God? David had plenty of opportunities over his lifetime to turn his screw-ups into something greater. Has 2020 given us opportunities to trust God in greater ways, to pray as David did in verse 1 and 2? Hear me, Lord, answer me, for I am poor and needy. Guard my life, for I am faithful to you. Save your servant who trusts in you. 2020 isn't over, and it's never too late to start to finish well. We can be God-dependent people who show those who come behind us how to rely on this faithful God. David's son Solomon prayed this prayer, and I pray it over you as well. It says, "May the Lord our God be with us as he was with our ancestors. May he never leave us nor forsake us. May he turn our hearts to him, to walk in obedience to him and keep the commands, decrees, and laws he gave our ancestors. And may these words of mine, which I have prayed before the Lord, be near to the Lord our God day and night, that he may uphold the cause of his servant and the cause of his people." Amen. Merry Christmas, stay safe, and be well.